up there in podcast land? This is Howlin, Steve Howell, coming from Burp Possum Records, and in the studio right now with me is the one and only Dustin Arbuckle, who's got a deep history and a deep love for the music that he plays. He's into all kinds of genres these days, but man, the soul that comes out of this brother, I think you'll hear it here in just a little while. And so, how are you doing, Dustin? How's life treating you?
It's going okay, Steve. Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here talking to you.
Hey, it's my joy and privilege, actually. I feel very fortunate that there's such a podcast out there. And I'll tell you a little bit about the podcast on there so the folks that are listening know this, that I got into the podcast business just simply because there wasn't anybody talking to musicians, and so I saw that need out there, and there's folks that have been around a long time, and they're scratching out a living during times of COVID, and now's the time to talk about it because COVID has stopped a lot of people from playing. I just got through interviewing Phil Newton and the Shouters from Southern Oregon, and they're shut down, basically. They have no place they can go because the buildings are closed. They won't let them in, so this kind of a podcast hopefully will bring sound to the listener and will encourage them to look up more about who Dustin Arbuckle is. And so I do welcome you on the show. I want to do a little background on you. It's you started with Aaron Moreland, right? Back in the day.
Yeah. Well, I started before that. I'd started gigging kind of around Wichita in my late teenage years with like some local, sort of blues and blues rock bands. Different, I had my own band with some friends that I'd known from high school, and that's what I first kind of started getting out there here just around the area with, and played around town with other bands that were around. And then Aaron and I got to know each other around the time I was about 19 or 20, and started doing our thing together. And of course that lasted the next 15 years in one form or another.
Oh my. Some of the houses you guys played, man, fantastic. I bumped into you guys while I was doing a blues competition in Memphis. You guys were playing down on the corner, actually 2 doors down from where I was playing. And I stopped and got to talk to Aaron before you guys went on, and I got to watch you for a little while. And then I had a meeting with the same guy that you know very well, Bruce Iglauer of Alligator Records.
Yes, I do know Bruce very well. Had a good experience working with him. I was lucky enough to.
Can you tell me a little bit about that experience?
Well, I think in the modern blues world, or at least for the last 30 or 40 years, 50 years now, Alligator has been the kind of consistently the most, premier independent blues label in the world, and they put out records by a lot of legends and a lot of great bands. And so even though it was the last Moreland Arbuckle record that we put out, and we only did get to work with Alligator for one album, it was a great experience. They really take care of their artists well. They do a lot to get their artists out there and try to increase awareness of them. And
oh wow,
it was to me it was a wonderful experience working with Bruce and everybody at Alligator. He's got a great team, a lot of great people at that label. So I feel lucky that I was able to have that experience.
Yeah. I got to talk to him over a whiskey, and he actually bought it for me. We were talking about a song that I wrote, and I was talking about selling it to him, and we just it just didn't happen for me. It just didn't work out. But that's, hey, that's life, right? I mean, Bruce is a great guy. He was fun. I mean, he had a lot of stories, and he joked with me. He liked my guitar sets, I mean, he likes my guitar playing. He really wasn't really happy about my voice. And that's the truth. I mean, that is how it worked. But Bruce is, like I said, he's been so generous. Every time I've sent him any of my work, he's written me back with a great critique on how to make it better. And get a personal letter from a guy that is like that is just an amazing thing itself.
Yeah, that's one thing I've always appreciated about Bruce is his candor and his just his knowledge. I mean, we certainly didn't always agree on everything, and
sure, right,
and all that kind of stuff. But from a perspective of a guy who certainly has a lot of knowledge and is going to give you an honest assessment of what he believes, and generally in a way that I found to be very constructive. I think it's great, and I don't think I've ever had a conversation with anyone who had a greater knowledge of the history of blues music.
Oh man.
And
yeah.
I mean, I can't hardly think of anyone else. And, so it was always fun to have those conversations, getting in debates about who our favorite, blues singers were, our favorite harmonica players, things like that. Again, it was a good experience. And we had casually known each other before, M&A was on the label.
Right.
It had some situations where we, kind of similar to what you had with him, where we had gotten to have conversations, even had dinner in Memphis at the IBC one year, just kind of randomly. And just he's a really interesting cat, and it was great working with Alligator.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. And tell me something about developing your vocal style that you have. I mean, because, man, I tell you, I listen to your vocals, and, man, I tell you what musician wouldn't want to play?
Oh, well, that's awfully kind of you.
with a musician like yourself, I mean, it's amazing, Dustin. It really is. I mean, how did you make that transition? I mean, how did you grow into that? Or did it just come naturally?
I mean, no, I definitely believe I had to grow into it. And I believe there's plenty of singers out there that are far better than I am. But, I have my thing, and it's worked very well for me over the last, 20 plus years of doing this as either part or all of my living. I've been singing as long as I could talk. I've always liked to sing. It always brought me joy.
Right.
And when I was a kid, it was just whatever songs struck me that I heard around me. It was when I was about 15 or so that blues first really kind of bit me and really inspired me to want to create music. I never really had much of an inclination to do that. I'd been in choir, and I'd been in band in school and things like that. I mean,
sure.
But when I really kind of discovered blues as a musical style and started to understand what it was, I think that's what really inspired me to want to create music. And I think it's like anyone early on, you hear the things you like and you kind of try to imitate those things. And I spent a few years doing that and trying to sound like the classic guys whose music I love, people like Muddy Waters or, Son House, R.L. Burnside or Robert Johnson or Sonny Boy Williamson or, people like that.
My boys.
Big Bill Brunsey is one of my favorite singers of all time. And I listened back to early recordings of myself, and I was trying to sound like someone I wasn't.
That you weren't. Right. Oh, good point. Yeah.
I eventually, I think I learned how to absorb the influence and how to use the vocal inflections in a way that is still me and my voice, and not to try and sound like someone else. I mean, I think we're all a mixture of our influences, all of us as artists.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
We're all the coming together of our influences. And then it's just a question of how much you can find your own voice from the mixture of things that have influenced you. And so, I mean, that's what I guess I just tried to do. And then the older I got, I was really, really super into everything that I felt like was blues or kind of blues related, which in my late teens and early 20s was actually a fairly narrow scope. Right. But then eventually, as I grew up, I started to get more into other kinds of roots music. I started to absorb kind of rock and pop music again, which I kind of shut out for a few years. Yeah. And I think all of those things have continued to influence me and help me understand, how to best use my voice. And another thing I've done over the years is I try really hard to take care of my voice. I don't drink when I sing. I don't drink generally when I'm on the road. Great. Maybe on a night off, I'll have a couple of drinks, but when I don't drink at shows, because it's just too hard on my voice. Mm-hmm. I always warm up before shows, try to do at least some kind of cool down exercises, try to make sure I'm drinking a ton of water and getting as much sleep as I can, which the sleep part can be very difficult.
Man.
It's those have been all the things, just that I've tried to do to help develop what I do. I mean, at least vocally over the years.
Well, that's a great explanation. And I'm sure a lot of the listeners, especially the younger ones that are up and coming, I mean, it's a good thing for a musician to tell where they got it, so the next person could come along and hear it, and maybe we'll get more greatness in the world, and the generational thing will keep progressing through folks like yourself. I mean, it was like we were looking at like who is the next generation. I mean, in my lifetime, I've seen Muddy Waters die. I mean, in the middle of there's like a crisis to me. And I went out and knocked on the door of Rory Gallagher. I wanted to meet Rory Gallagher, and I was in Cork, Ireland, where he lived, and so I basically marched up his door. I'm pretty bold, I'm a pretty bold guy. So sometimes I walked up there, and I wanted to talk to him about the same things I'm talking to you about. Where'd you get your inspiration? Where'd you find it at? The next question I have for you, moving along, is you play the harmonica, and you just don't play the harmonica. You say something with the harmonica, and there's so many players that I've backed up, and I won't name any names. I mean, I've played behind them and traveled with them, but they were like 3-note wonders, and they knew how to sing, and they were great singers, but they just didn't know how to, they just don't know how to talk with the instrument. And looking at the harmonica, it isn't just a shtick; it is a viable piece, especially in Americana, in our society today. Harmonica, yeah. I mean, there was guys out on the range singing and playing their harmonica at the same time, or guys would be gathered around a harmonica just playing. It wasn't every day you could pack a guitar on your horse. Sure. Back in the day, So anyway, tell me about your exploration into playing harmonica and how your approach came about.
I think what probably gets a lot of people interested in the harmonica is the fact that it's it is portable. It's portable and on the face, when you compare it to other instruments, it's cheap. I've told this story a lot over the years. When I started thinking I wanted to maybe start a band or something when I was a teenager, and I thought I was going to just, be a stand-up singer. My dad was giving me crap about it and was like, no, you got to play something. You can't just be a singer. In retrospect, I feel like Bobby Bland or Otis Redding probably would have disagreed with that, but, I took his advice, and thought about what I wanted to try to play, and my first inclination was to try the harmonica. I liked the sound of the harmonica. You know, I liked players like Sonny Boy Williamson and Sonny Terry. Those are some of the first guys who's playing really. Junior Wells. Those are some of the first guys who's playing kind of caught my attention. Although, well, I'll come back to that. But so my first inclination to move toward harmonica was because of the fact that I figured it was cheaper to try than playing guitar or playing piano or something of that nature. And if I didn't feel like I had any aptitude for it, it's not like we were going to be out a few $100s for me to just try it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so, you know, my folks bought me my first harmonica, and
man,
my dad, I was 16, and my dad had an old friend, a fellow named Bill Garrison, who was a great harmonica player, great musician who was based here in the Wichita area, and took me to meet Bill. And you know, Bill had been around since the 60s and stuff like that. And another guy who really, he knew his old school blues and roots music and stuff like that. Played me a bunch of old records. He had these, you know, all those American Folk Blues Festival DVDs that you can get just anywhere now. Like before all that stuff was out, you know, available to the public, Bill had these like dubbed off video VHS tapes of a whole bunch of that stuff. And so that was a really important experience for me to get to see a lot of that and connect to even more blues that I hadn't heard before. And getting to see somebody who actually was a very adept harmonica player do it up close and personal. You know, Bill also was a good guitar player. And so he'd play harp on a rack, and honestly, one of the best rack harp players I ever heard. Which there's not a lot of great rack harp players. Bill was very good at it. And so, you know, that was kind of the start. And I just started playing around with the instrument and trying to emulate what I heard on the old blues records. I mean, kind of the same as with singing with, you know, but again, the portability was great because you know, as a teenager, I'd be driving around and just playing along with whatever I was listening to. You know, that's how I did a lot of practicing. You know, I could be walking, even walking around between classes or stuff sometimes at school. I didn't do that very long. People kind of look at you weird, but
that would be different. All right.
That was how it started. And, you know, as I went along in that first couple of years of my playing, you know, like Sonny Boy Williamson, #2, was the first harmonica player who's playing, really bit me. And I think that I really wanted to try to emulate. And he's still, you know, one of my biggest influences, but then, you know, like I liked Howlin' and Wolf's style. It's really simple and rudimentary, but again, early on, you know, you get a really interesting rhythmic sense from Wolf. Like he had a great rhythmic sense. And then Little Walter really struck me, but it was the stuff that Little Walter did on Muddy Waters records, because Walter's stuff, like,
of course. Yeah.
His own stuff almost just kind of blew my mind. Like it was almost over my head at the beginning. But on Muddy's stuff, when he's a sideman, Muddy kind of reined him in a little bit. So you still get that tone and you still get that sound and that ability, but it was a little easier for me to digest and to try to emulate when I was first trying to play. And then later when I really started to dig harder into Little Walter's solo stuff, that, you know, I mean, that stuff's still probably the most important electric blues harmonica stuff that's ever been recorded. As far as the influence that it's had. And then, you know, like Big Walter Horton is another big influence. I like George Smith, Paul Butterfield, Sonny Terry. I love Sonny Terry's harmonica playing. But then I met a cat named Lee McBee, who was
Kansas City musician, right?
Yeah, he was actually from around Lawrence.
That's right. Yep.
Spent has played a lot around Kansas City and spent a lot of years in kind of from like the very end of the 80s through kind of the early to mid aughts. With a Dallas based band called Mike Morgan and the Crawl.
Right.
Band. I got to hear Lee with his band at the old Roadhouse in Wichita when I was about 19. And that was like a life-changing experience because whereas like early on getting to hear Bill do his thing in person was big when I was first getting started. Now at that point, I was maybe three years or so into playing. And I considered myself more of a singer than a harmonica player. And I felt like harp was I liked it. I wanted to be good at it, but I felt like it was more of an aside. And then I got to see Lee in person, and I don't know what it was. I felt like maybe it was the first time I got to see like a truly great, like amplified harmonica player who was also like a really good stand-up singer right there in person, right up front, right up close and personal. And
it's a call and he was great at call and response and play a line, sing the line.
Lee was very good at that. And he was very generous with his time talking to me after the show. And I started going up to Kansas City on Sundays from time to time, every few weeks, to hear his standing regular gig that he had there at BB's Lawnside Barbecue. And
right.
I was lucky enough, Lee really became like, as far as a direct influence, as far as a musician, kind of a musical mentor, a person that I knew and I could go see play live and call. Little Walter was dead years before I was born. Sonny Boy Williamson was dead years before I was born. I love their music. It's been tremendously influential on me. Lee was the guy, like the living, breathing musical hero that I could talk to and kind of gain and learn things from. And he also he was a good friend.
You hear that, Lee? Good job, man. That's really true. What you're saying about him is I mean, he was jaw-dropping good at times. I mean, I heard him times at BB's that was just amazing, because when I lived in Kansas City, it was a really important time to go see guys like that. And of course, I'd go down to see Jimmy Lewin, who would back him up every now and then.
Yeah, Jimmy's a great guitar player.
Great guitar player. Great friend.
And that's too. Yeah, no, Jimmy's a good dude. I love him. And that's also how Brandon Hudspeth and I became connected, was through Lee, because Brandon would play in Lee's band fairly frequently. And so, that's kind of interesting that now, Brandon and I are playing together in the Damnations here for the last few years. But I mean, we've known each other for about 20 years now, because of Lee. So that's
great.
That's pretty cool.
That's a great hookup. I want to segue into Say My Name, a song that you've written. And I happen to really like this tune. It makes me want to jump, man. It makes me want to get to do that jump thing.
Good. That's what it's for.
Here we go. So let's make sure that it'll play. And bam. There it is.
Tell me what you need, just to let me know. We could stay right here, I could take you where you wanna go. I'm gonna show you what you want to see. Get your shoes, take my hand and go exactly where you wanna be. Say my name, say my name, say my name, say my name. Talk to me, just to use my time. You got my attention, let me know what you got on your mind. I just need to know how you want to groove. Well, just use your hips to show me how you want my hips to move. Say my name, say my name, say my name. Say my name. say the word. When it's from your lips, it's the finest thing I ever heard. Everything you say is all I want to hear. Oh, you can shout it loud, come close and whisper in my ear. Say my name. 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 Say my name.
Dustin Arbuckle, say my name. Did you hear me, Mama? Say my name. Great tune, man. How did you come up with that? That's a great hook line.
Well,
Great.
thank you. And actually, I should, in all honesty, I did not come up with it. That the bulk of that song was actually written by our my good friend and our sometimes bass player in the Damnations, Mark Foley.
Oh,
Mark wrote the bulk of that song, and he sent it to me. He's like, "What do you think of it?" And I love the hook and I love the groove. All I really did on that song was just kind of help refine the lyrics. I rewrote some stuff and kind of tightened up some of the verses and things like that. But that's mostly Mark's song, and I feel really lucky that he sent it. He brought that to the table because it's been one of our best songs with the Damnations.
oh, it's amazing. I mean, that song has all kind of groove to you. Saw me, man. I want to get up and I just make you want to jump. I mean, if you're hearing that live and you're sitting still, you're dead.
Yeah, it tends to go over. It tends to go over pretty well.
It goes over real well. Yeah. Well, let's move on because like I said, with you, I just don't have enough time to cover
Sure.
all that you are. I mean, it's like, man, and I'm hopefully we'll get to have you back on the show. That's an invite for the
I'd
future.
be happy to.
I want to have return people because, like I said, I want this to be an ongoing, growing situation, and you'll be played on Apple and Google and Spotify, all this. And if with your permission, if I could do YouTube, I'd put this video on YouTube so people could know more about you. They actually get to watch you talk about your music, which is like no, man, it's like a school. You're like going to school for even me, and I'm old, So anyway, we're gonna move on to You Got to Know. You want to introduce and how what this is all about?
Sure. So the last song, Say My Name, is my electric band, Dustin Arbuckle and the Damnations, which includes myself and Brandon Hudspeth on guitar, and either Mark Foley or Caleb Drummond on bass, depending on the situation, and then Kendall Newby, who was our longtime drummer for the last several years that Moreland Arbuckle was together on the drums. And so with that band, it's more of a cross-genre kind of electric blues, roots rock, Americana sort of a thing. We try to bring in a lot of influences, and the guys are all versatile enough, players that I feel like we're able to accomplish a lot of different things pretty tastefully and effectively. And I think even in Say My Name, you kind of hear some of those different influences coming together. But what you have on deck now is You Got to Know. And this is my duo with my good friend Matt Woods from Ames, around Ames, Iowa, is where Matt lives. And whereas as the Damnations are pretty cross-genre, what Matt and I do is pretty much just straight ahead, heavy-handed, gritty country blues stuff.
Oh, I love it too, man. I love it.
That's kind of Mississippi blues, and kind of maybe edges into some kind of early Chicago blues and some other kind of some country blues styles, but it's pretty stripped down, pretty raw, pretty simple. Matt's great. He's you know, he's a great acoustic guitar player and electric guitar player. He's a great singer. And we'd heard about each other for years, kind of just through mutual friends in the Midwestern scene. And I think had met real briefly one time at a winter festival in Des Moines.
Oh, wow.
But what happened was a few years ago, around the time Moreland and Arbuckle split up, I was just looking for new things to do. And I think Matt and I got to be friends on social media, and I was seeing a lot of videos and stuff he was posting of himself playing, and really dug his style. And, you know, he posted something about wanting to kind of collaborate with more people. He'd been doing mostly the solo thing for a few years and was kind of getting sick of it and wanted to collaborate more. So I reached out and said, hey, if I'm ever coming through the area, would you ever want to do some shows together? And he said yes. And so it just kind of happened. Summer of 2018, I was coming through, and he threw together a couple just kind of random bar shows up around Ames. And wow. we just
amazing.
I think I got to his house about an hour and a half before this first show we were supposed to play together. We didn't really have any time to jam. We just kind of met up and got to talking and went and played this first show, and it just worked. It was just
great.
We've got a lot of the same influences and a lot of the same kind of stylistic ideas, and it was like falling off a log.
Oh, it's so great, man. Oh, it's good to hear. I love stuff like that. I've had that joy of collaborations like that come together a couple times in my life, and it's like magic happens. You know, it's just so. So I'd like to play this because we are running out of time, and I want to play all of these songs that you gave me, the 3 songs, and they're really worthy of being played. So here we go.
You got to know, you got to know.
baby. You got to know. Man, I tell you, I don't care how many times I hear those riffs or anything like that. It goes right through my core, man. I mean, it's just that music will never, ever wear me out, never tire me out.
And it just works. It just good for you.
Works. And I love the way you play the harp on that thing. And man, the way he sits on that guitar too, man, his timing is really good. He's like a drummer. Mm-hmm. He's almost as good as a drummer right there on that thing. That's really good.
His thumb really keeps it going. And, you know, we made that record in about it's the fun thing about that band is that that act is that we can kind of split up the singing. So like on that song, I just get to be a harmonica player, which sometimes is kind of fun. We made that record in about 3 hours and then barely tried to promote it, and it ended up getting nominated for Best Acoustic Album at the Blues Music Awards. So
oh, is that right?
Kind of crazy. I mean, we submitted it, but I mean, it was kind of funny. Like it's like I guess we did something right. So,
oh man, did you do
fun.
Something right? Oh my goodness, yeah, yeah, I'm pretty happy. So I got to move right along into Lights Along Broadway, and I'm taking it that when you mean Lights Along Broadway, is that a place in Wichita that because there's a nice street there that has a lot of different venues on it.
Yeah. So, and this song, this is from Haymakers, which is my kind of acoustic Americana folk bluegrass string band. And my longtime partner in that band, Tom Page, who plays guitar, wrote this song. And Tom and I have been playing together for over 15 years now. You know, we started kind of doing acoustic duo stuff back when I was still in Moreland Arbuckle. And then around 2012, we started Haymakers with Mark Foley on bass and a friend of ours named Ted Farha on mandolin. And it was kind of my main sort of like around town side project for a few years, but I always kind of wanted to be in a position to try to do more with it. So again, when Moreland Arbuckle split up, Tom and I started pushing the band a little bit harder, and we've been touring and all that stuff. And kind of same with the Damnations. Now Caleb Drummond does most of the touring on bass because Mark has a lot of obligations with the symphony in Wichita State, so he can't go on the road much. And a fellow named Dennis Harden does most of the mandolin work now. When Tom wrote this song, it was several years ago, but it was meant to be kind of a tribute to some veterans that he had known and, had watched go through their kind of trials and tribulations over the years. These guys that get put in these terrible situations and are kind of, forced to deal with the fallout of it for the rest of their lives, emotionally, mentally. And, there's a verse about a guy who's a Gulf War veteran, and a verse about a guy who's a Vietnam vet, and then a verse about a guy who's a World War II vet. And this song resonated with me a lot because the verse about the Vietnam vet was in part meant to be about my dad. And so, the Lights Along Broadway part of it, I think, is just kind of imagery that stuck in Tom's mind, the character of the song that kind of went along with it. From kind of the north end of town here in Wichita, which is the area he spent a lot of his life. And so, this is a song that I think meant a lot to all of us. So I hope, it seems to resonate with a lot of people.
Well, let's listen to it. I'm excited about it. I thought it was quite a side adventure for you. What's cool about it to me is that you branched out into something like the blues came down the road from a country kind of setting. It came from a country type singing, and there's many ways that the blues came around. But then there was that Appalachia blues that came out, and that's kind of that Irish feel that we get from listening to true Americana music. It's kind of the crossroads of where it all starts to weave, and guys were trying to decide, hey, we got to make a living. And if I play this, I'll do this, and if I play that, we can go here. And so it's a good segue. And to watch you do the same thing that the old guys did is like, man, that's, wow, man. Just like, Dustin, this is like fantastic. Anyway, let me play this song because I really like it.
It's called Lights Along Broadway.
And this is live, right?
This is from our most recent Haymakers album called Live at Our Church. Recorded in a really cool venue in Southwest Iowa called Our Church back in December of 2019.
Danny came back from Iraq with a crack in his back and a powerful pain. He washed it all down with some scotch, Oxycontin, never quite right again. The lights along Broadway remind me of Christmas somehow. And it's too bad you're not around. It's Saturday night in this packing plant town. Ronnie come home from the numb with a hole in his arm and a terrible need. No matter how much he did, never forget all the things he had seen. The lights along Broadway remind me of Christmas somehow. It's too bad you're not around. It's Saturday night in this packing plant town. Turned from Bataan, a shattered reflection of who he'd once been. Down at his hamburger stand, he'd tell you about what being a man meant to him. The lights along Broadway remind me of Christmas somehow. And it's too bad you're not around. Sit back and toss one more down. It's Saturday night in this packing plant town.
Thank you.
Oh my. Wow, what a great time I've had with you on the show. It's hard. Sometimes it's hard to say goodbye when I finally get to visit with so much history and someone that I've watched your career for quite a while. It's funny how I've become this observant person over the years of people that I've run across, and then I see their name, and it's really big to me. It might not be big to like say yourself, but it's really a big thing to us fans to be able to rub shoulders with you, and the fact that you're just so common to talk to, and have all this background of music that's flowed through you, and so. Like I said, I hate to close the show, but it's one of those hard things. So I'm going to go ahead and take us out. This is Howell and Steve Howell here we're at Burnt Possum Records at the studio. And I've been talking with Dustin Arbuckle, and he represents the genre of Americana clear across America. There is no more American music than you can find in this boy. And I tell you, I really appreciate him. So here we go. I'm going to kick it off and say goodbye with a tune. See y'all later in podcast land. Burnt Possum Records, remember us and come out to see with Hanging with the Band. That's what we're going to name this show. Hey, we'll see y'all later.